Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. I'll pray for us, and then we're going to pick up this morning in chapter 9. Kind of set the stage a little bit for the transition in the book here in Zechariah. We'll begin in chapter 9, but we can chat about some things from last week if you all would like to. I know I didn't quite make it through chapter 8, let me pray, and then we'll begin. Father, thank you for your grace today. Thank you for your word, that you've given it to us, that you've revealed yourself. Thank you for what we'll see this morning, be able to remember and reflect on just this picture of you as a shepherd, a good shepherd who cares for your people. And I just pray by your grace that you would help us to see all the ways that you guide and protect and care and feed and nourish us. Just that image would sink down just deep into our souls, and chiefly through what you've done in your Son, the Lord Jesus. So bless our time together as we look at your word, as we work through it, and I just pray that you would work by it for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so last week we didn't quite make it through the end of 8. Not going to go back to the text to work through, but just wanted to ask here at the beginning, anything from what we covered last week, looking at chapters 7, part of 8, anything that you would like to revisit or that you had questions about from your own reading before we dive into 9? No problem, if not. All right, well, no, not at all. Thanks, Mary. Well, let's go to chapter 9 then. You can turn there, and we'll start working through. You'll probably notice, even just from the way your Bible is printed, that chapter 9 does mark a transition in the text, which we already pointed that out in the last few weeks. It seems that chapters 1 through 8 were written before the temple was completed there in Jerusalem, rebuilt. And then chapter 9 is after a gap of a few years after the temple has been completed. And so we see that in the text in a few places, but so much so that many would say, well, this just feels different. This probably isn't even Zechariah. I don't think that's the case. Just a gap of some years and him writing, and it's more, how it's laid out in your Bible. You can see that it is more poetic. These are oracles, prophecies here at the beginning of 9 and through 10 and then into 11. But what we begin to see here in chapter 9 through 11, so what we'll look at this morning, they go together, beginning to paint a picture of what this restoration will look like. And just imagine, so in the first recipients, the temple has already been completed, and yet there is this sense of, okay, what now? When are the rest of God's covenant promises going to come about? The temple's completed, and yet we still have these foreign rulers that are ruling over us, and we don't see a Davidic king back on the throne. We don't see God's glory going out to the nations in the way maybe that we expected. So what next? What is God going to do? And so 9 through 11, God begins to describe that, what this restoration is going to look like, what he's going to do. And then especially in chapter 12 through 14, we begin to get a lot of really beautiful imagery. Zechariah picks up on this theme of the day of the Lord that the prophets speak to often, pointing to this future day in which God is going to intervene in a full and final way to redeem his people and his creation. And so that's what you'll see next week, beginning in chapter 12. But let's just go ahead and dig in. We'll just work our way through 9 through 11 and see what God is doing here. Okay, beginning in chapter 9. We'll go through verse 8. The oracle of the word of the Lord is against the land of Hadrach, and Damascus is its resting place. For the Lord has an eye on mankind and on all the tribes of Israel, and on Hamath also, which borders on it, Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise. Tyre has built herself a rampart and heaped up silver like dust, and fine gold like the mud of the streets. But behold, the Lord will strip her of her possessions, and strike down her power on the sea, and she shall be devoured by fire. Ashkelon shall see it and be afraid, Gaza too, and shall writhe in anguish, Ekron also, because its hopes are confounded. The king shall perish from Gaza, Ashkelon shall be uninhabited, a mixed people shall dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of Philistia. I will take away its blood from its mouth, and its abominations from between its teeth, and it too shall be a remnant for our God. It shall be like a clan in Judah, and Ekron shall be like the Jebusites. Then I will encamp at my house as a guard, so that none shall march to and fro, no oppressor shall again march over them, for now I see with my own eyes. Okay, so what's going on here? A lot of places, a lot of names, places we're probably not familiar with. But let's just point out that all of these places here at the beginning, that God is announcing a judgment through Zechariah on these foreign nations, foreign kingdoms, and places that surround Israel, that surround Jerusalem. We see God announcing judgment on them, which we'll walk through. But we also see there at the end, there in verses 7 and 8, this really beautiful promise that even among them, this is no surprise, God is saying, and yet there's going to be a remnant from even among those nations, among those peoples, who are going to come to know Him as the one true God. So let's walk back through and see that. So we have all of these other places, other cities, acknowledging that God is Lord over all, that He's the King over all of the nations. He's in special covenant relationship with His people, and yet He has an eye over all mankind. And so He describes in these different ways how these foreign kingdoms, these foreign nations surrounding Israel are going to be brought to judgment. I'll just read there in verse 4 again. Behold, the Lord will strip her of her possessions, strike down her power on the sea. She shall be devoured by fire. He mentions Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron, all of these places that are cities that belong to Philistia, right? This age-old enemy of God's people. God is saying He's going to enact judgment upon the nations, and not just specifically these people or these places, but kind of in a geographical way, describing the people around Israel to again remind us, the people, I'm going to execute judgment. That there are no peoples, no nations that are going to stand in opposition to me. But then this beautiful turn, like we said, beginning there in verse 7. I will take away its blood from its mouth and abominations from between its teeth. So maybe referring to some sort of cult, idolatrous religious practice there in Philistia, this enemy of God's people. God's saying, I'm going to take that away, and it too shall be a remnant for our God. So when the prophets use the word of remnant, what does He mean there? What's meant by saying that even from among Philistia, there will be a remnant for our God?
True believers.
Okay.
I mean, that's what a remnant is.
Sure. So,
How can, it seems incongruent, though. We're talking about idolatry or wickedness, but how flesh it out.
just even there,
Yeah.
in verse 7?
There, because they're doing something, this idolatrous practice. Previous to that.
Right, verse 7. Well, I think it mirrors, just think about all the places in Zechariah even, but also the rest of the prophets, where God has to say this exact sort of thing about Israel, right? He has to say, I'm going to go back to the images that we saw back in like chapter 5, flying scroll, it's going to purify the people. The lady, wickedness, that's taken out of the land and taken to Shinar. So I think He's saying just what He has to do for those who should know Him in Israel. He's got to remove their sin, right, to make them His own. Even so, He's saying here, even from among Philistia, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take away their rebellion, their idolatry. I'm going to save them, right? I'm going to give them a new heart. And among them, even there shall be a remnant for our God. Just think about hearing this for the first time, right? Saying that from among Philistia, it will be like a clan in Judah. Like just like as if they were a descendant of Jacob himself. And Ekron shall be like the Jebusites. So here referring to this people that were incorporated into, I believe at the time of David, right? When David takes the city of Jerusalem, this foreign people that are incorporated into the people of God. They live among them. And God's saying, that's what I'm also going to do, even from Philistia, right? Make a people for myself. So he's saying, I'm going to judge the nations, but I'm also going to have a remnant. I'm going to save a people from myself, or for myself, from your enemies, Israel. And then he says in verse 8, then I will encamp at my house as a guard, so that none shall march to and fro. No oppressor shall again march over them, for now I see with my own eyes. So just imagine, again, right, if the temple has already been concluded, and God is now speaking in this way through Zechariah, saying that in this future day, yes, I'm going to judge the nations, I'm also going to save the nations, and then I will be at rest, right? I will encamp at my house. My presence will be among my people, but not only those from Israel and Judah, but also from the other nations, right, from Philistia that God saved. Saying my presence is going to be with my people. And this is what we've heard over and over and over again in Zechariah and all throughout the prophets, this promise that God's going to purify, save, and dwell among His people. All right, let's begin reading in verse 9 to go through the rest of chapter 9. This is going to be very familiar to you, I think. So the question is, okay, how is this going to come about? When is God going to enact His judgment? When is He going to save from among the nations? Well, it's through His king, through His Davidic king. Verse 9, rejoice, O greatly. So at this news, rejoice, O greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is He. Humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim, and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and He shall speak peace to the nations. His rule shall be from sea to sea, and from the rivers to the ends of the earth. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. Today I declare that I will restore to you double. For I have bent Judah as my bow. I have made Ephraim its arrow. I will stir up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece, and wield you like a warrior's sword. And then the Lord will appear over them. His arrow will go forth like lightning. The Lord God will sound the trumpet and will march forth in the whirlwinds of the south. The Lord of hosts will protect them, and they shall devour and tread down the sling stones, and they shall drink and roar as if drunk with wine, and be full like a bowl, drenched like the corners of the altar. On that day the Lord their God will save them as the flock of His people. For like the jewels of a crown they shall shine on His land. For, here's this doxology at the end. For how great is His goodness, and how great is His beauty. Grain shall make the young men flourish, and new wine the young women. So what's the promise here? What's he pointing to? Well, this saying, this salvation is going to come, that they are to look for His salvation, His restoration, His judgment on the nations, that all of it is going to come through this promised king. He calls the people to rejoice, right? These things are coming, and these promises of God, the covenant realities of God, are never divorced from this promised king who is to come. And it's a Davidic king, right? That God had already promised further back in the Old Testament that a descendant of David would sit on the throne forever, that David would have a son who would rule over the people of God for forever and ever, that there would never be a day where he was not ruling. And we see in, I think, some subtle ways here that image pulled out a little bit more. You know, why is this sort of a promise at first reading not so comforting to the people, maybe? or why would I think they would hesitate a little bit? Rejoice, for your king is coming, and he's mounted on a donkey. Why is that?
It's not a very stately.
It's not a very, yeah. Just kings don't ride donkeys, right? They ride war horses, white war horses. And so what is this? Where's he drawing from? Well, if you remember back, there's another place in the Old Testament in particular where a king rides on a donkey. Back in 2 Samuel chapter 16, this is King David. Off the top of your head, does anybody remember what David is doing there? Why he's riding a donkey out of Jerusalem? And it's out of Jerusalem, it's not into Jerusalem. Anybody remember? So Absalom, David's son, has just incited a rebellion, begun to take over the kingdom, and David, in all of his glory, has to get on a donkey and get the heck out of Dodge, right? He's got to leave Jerusalem. He's got it because Absalom's taking over Jerusalem. And so he's sent into exile, right? He's not on a war horse. He's not in a chariot. He's gathered together with a few supporters that he has, and he has to leave Jerusalem. And so that David himself goes into exile out of the kingdom. So we're beginning to get this picture describing, okay, this king, he's going to be like David. He's going to restore all of these places that were listed previously earlier in chapter 9. All of these are places, I believe, that David conquered, that he exercised rulership over when his kingdom was at its height. So we're getting this picture of a Davidic king who's going to come, and yet somehow it's through his exile that he's going to come and bring about this restoration. It's going to be like David, who was sent out of Jerusalem in defeat, that this restoration is going to come. That's what the people are to rejoice at and to look forward to. So just imagine, you think about David's cries as he is sent out of Jerusalem and the psalms that he writes and his lamentations. It seems as if Zechariah is trying to paint a picture of, David as a sufferer, as one who was sent into exile, and also picking up on themes from Isaiah of this suffering servant, right? Both of these things coming together for a description of this king. But what else does God describe here? So it says he's going to cut off the chariot from Ephraim, war horse from Jerusalem. He's going to bring peace. So this king who is to come, he's going to make war to cease, right? Somehow. He's riding in on a donkey, not on a war horse, and yet he is going to be able to make war to cease. There will be peace over all of the earth, as it should be, right? This is where it's going. This is where the fulfillment is headed, is that all nations would be under his rule. His rule shall be from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. That Zechariah is describing that under this king of God, his chosen king, that he's going to have a global rule. Not just a little pocket of territory by the Mediterranean, but a global rule over all of the earth. And so how's that going to come about? Back in verse 11. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Return to your stronghold, O prisoners of hope. Today I declare that I will restore to you double. What kind of language is that Zechariah is evoking here? Any thoughts? If he's bringing to mind pictures of prisoners being set free, the blood of the covenant being established with the people, what does that sound like?
In Luke 4, Jesus talked about setting prisoners free. He's quoting Isaiah when he went into the temple. He picked up the scroll and he began reading. I mean, that language of setting the prisoners free.
The prisoners are going to be set free? Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're supposed to go back to when they, the Exodus. I don't know how much.
Yeah.
Go back to that.
Sure. I think so. All right. I think, and all of the setting free language that we see in the Bible usually is evoking that, I think, right? Because that is the paradigmatic story of salvation. If you ask Zechariah, how do you remember God's salvation? Well, it's the Exodus, right? It's a no-brainer. Like, this is the story of our people. This is who we are. And I think this is what he's evoking here. So saying this king's going to bring this. He's going to bring it. He's going to be a son of David. He's going to establish rule. And it's going to be like a new Exodus. The prophets use this sort of language all the time. That under this new king, this king that is coming, God is going to bring about another Exodus. So the blood of my covenant, just think back, when the Mosaic covenant was established with the people on Mount Sinai. How was it sealed? Well, it was sealed in blood, right? Moses and the elders of the people were sprinkled with blood. Jesus picks up on this language in the New Testament, referring back to the blood of the covenant and this language of freedom and restoration. All of it to say, I think, that this is going to be a new kind of Exodus, that God is going to bring about this freedom for His people, and He's going to do it like He did at the Exodus, right? The picture of the Exodus that the Old Testament writers often use is this picture of God as a warrior, right? He appeared to execute judgment on Egypt, to strike down the gods of the nations, the gods of Egypt. And this is how he describes it here, even again, that this salvation is going to come through Davidic king. It's going to be like a new Exodus, and God Himself is going to bring it about through His appearance. There in verse 14, then the Lord will appear over them. His arrow will go forth like lightning. The Lord God will sound the trumpet. He will protect His people, and they will be. He will save them. There in verse 16, they're going to be like a flock, right? God is going to appear to save His people and act as a shepherd, and like the jewels of a crown, they shall shine on His land. I mean, just a beautiful description of God's people being the symbol of His rule, of His glory, right? That's, when kings wear a crown, what does it point to? Well, it points to their glory, their wealth, their power, their strength. It's a reflection of their throne. And God's saying, my people are going to be like the jewels on my crown. There's language like this all over the New Testament of the people of God being God's trophies, right? We're the testament to His grace. Has everybody been following the jewel heist at the Louvre? Anybody? Did you see that they arrested somebody this morning? Yeah. It's like a James Bond movie. I mean, did you all listen to how they did it? Oh, really? I hadn't heard that. They had an inside? Okay. Oh, I did hear that the security guards just kind of let them do their thing. They evacuated the people. I was like, wow, if this was in America, that is not how that would have gone. I have to tell this story. I was listening to the New York Times reporters describing what happened, and the one reporter said, so they went up on this bucket and they got to the door and they used this thing called an angle grinder, to open it. And the other reporter was like, what is that? And she's like, well, it's kind of like an electric handsaw. I was like, okay, this is New York Times. They used an angle grinder, this foreign tool. That just struck me. Maybe nobody else. But okay, so jewels of a crown. My mind had to go there. God's saying, my people are going to be like that. They're going to be like my jewels, the jewels that they stole, right? A gift from Napoleon to his second wife as a symbol of status, royalty, power, of a dominion. God's saying, my people are going to be like that, a testament to my grace and to my salvation. So if we had to sum all this up in chapter 9, what's God pointing to? Well, that there's going to be a king who is to come, that God Himself is going to appear. This king is going to be one who rides on a donkey. He's going to be humble, and yet somehow he also is going to execute judgment on all the nations, affect a global rule, a global peace under His reign. And so the invitation is for God's people to trust in that king, to trust in this new Exodus that this king is bringing. And then I don't think it's no coincidence then that all four gospel writers in the New Testament are very careful to include one detail about Jesus when He comes. I'll just read Matthew's Matthew's account. Matthew chapter 21, beginning in verse 1. Now when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, you shall say, The Lord needs them, and he will send them at once. This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, Say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, on the foal of a beast of burden. And the disciples went and did just as Jesus had directed them. So what is Jesus doing? All 4 gospel writers include this. It's not something that happens very often, right? That all 4 would include this specific detail just in the same way. And Matthew is quoting directly from Zechariah here, saying that Jesus is not just doing this for fun, right? He's not just saying, I think I'll ride a donkey into Jerusalem today. He is intentionally evoking all of this imagery, saying, this is what I'm doing. I'm bringing about this new Exodus. I'm bringing this new kingdom. I'm bringing about this salvation. And then it's no surprise then what are they thinking though? They're thinking, okay, he's going to do this by military might. They try to force him to become king, right? This is what they're expecting. And then the paradox of it all is that it's through Jesus' own exile, his own being sent out of Jerusalem, that he brings about that victory, which is through his cross. Right? That's the upside-down nature of the gospel, that Jesus brings about this life through his own death and his own sacrifice for sins. And so, the call for us in Zechariah 9 is to trust in this King, to trust in this Jesus whom we clearly see in the New Testament.
It's really interesting, just your last comment there about the first century expectation of who this king was and what he would be like in terms of a military leader.
Yeah.
Whereas you read this and, we're talking lowly, humble. It talks about disarmament of surrounding nations. It talks about, Jesus or this ruler proclaiming peace to the nations. So everything opposite of what they were actually expecting in the first century, and how that narrative changed into what they were thinking when Jesus actually came was completely different than what Zechariah is talking about here.
Sure, yeah. And and as we're going to talk about, part of our hope in trusting in this King is now awaiting for the day when he does appear on a white horse. This is coming, Revelation 21, where he's going to have a sword in his mouth and execute judgment on the nations. We still wait for that day. There is a military might day coming, but the inescapable reality of the gospel that makes it unique, right, is that Jesus, we can't get away from the cross, right? That Jesus is saying this is how it all comes. The victory, the restoration, and now we can, having the eyes to see, we can go back and read, even here in Zechariah, and see, oh, this is what the prophets were saying was to come.
I think it's interesting also, even in this Old Testament prophecy, Zechariah seems to be including salvation or inclusion of non-Jewish,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So the Gentiles as well.
Absolutely, right.
It's been a very foreign concept at the time.
Sure, and when we see that it was often, but at the same time, going back and reading, it shouldn't have been also. We do see, maybe they would say, okay, yeah, that's going to happen in the future. But, this is what God had promised from the very beginning, right? That before Moses was Abraham, and this promise that through Abraham, all of the nations, all the families of the earth would be blessed. And then so Paul, New Testament authors are very clear to make these connections and say, okay, in Jesus, the Mosaic covenant is fulfilled, but also in Jesus, the promise to Abraham is fulfilled. And so all the nations, all the families of the earth would come in. Yeah, something weird? Sure.
I was thinking about that too. So who is his audience again? And so are they not seeing that and thinking, wait, we're special, we're separate. Why is he talking about including? I mean, is there some of that going on too, possibly?
Sure.
I don't think we see a response to this, do we?
Sure. No, yeah, we don't see a response, right? So, yeah, the people there in Jerusalem after the temple's completed. And so, yeah, we see elsewhere in the prophets more of that response of, well, what about us, right? Aren't we the covenant people? Which, again, just shows that they don't understand the nature of the promise, right? Yes, because God is saying, he says elsewhere in the prophets, it's too small a thing, that I would only save a people in Israel, but all the nations, that a remnant from the nations. Yeah. Okay, let's go into chapter 10 and see what God begins to highlight here. And 9, 10, 11 all have a lot of these same themes of this coming king, particularly we'll see in 10 and 11 emphasizing this idea of God himself and this coming king as being a shepherd. We've already seen that in 16, right? On that day, the Lord their God will save them as the flock of his people. And this is a thoroughly consistent theme throughout the Old Testament of God being described as a shepherd over his people, caring for his people. No surprise then that David himself evokes that as a shepherd who shepherds as a king over the people. So that'll continue here in 10. So let's read through chapter 10. He says there, "Ask rain from the Lord in the season of the spring rain, from the Lord who makes the storm clouds, and he will give them showers of rain to everyone the vegetation in the field. For the household gods utter nonsense, and the diviners see lies. They tell false dreams and give empty consolation. Therefore the people wander like sheep. They are afflicted for lack of a shepherd." So it seems to the imagery seems to shift here, but what's God saying? Verse 1, that I am the one true Lord over the earth, right? I control. You ask for me for the rains, the early and the late rains that bring about the grain crop there in around Israel, crucial to their livelihood. God is saying, you ask for that from me, right? These household gods, the diviners that you seek. If you're seeking other gods, other spiritual forces, if you're acting like the nations from which you have just returned, then you're living in nonsense. You're living in lies. You're being given empty consolation. And therefore, if that is what you are doing, God's description is that these people, they wander like sheep, that they are afflicted for lack of a shepherd. This is exactly the description of the people before the exile, right? That they had given themselves to worship other gods, that they were not exclusively worshiping the God of Israel, that they were seeking the gods of the nations. And so this is God's diagnosis, that the people, to the extent that they are not seeking him, acting like the nations, seeking out other gods, that they are like sheep that don't have a shepherd, which if you know anything about sheep, that's just disastrous, right? Sheep left to their own devices are going to try to kill themselves because that's just what they do. I mean, they find creative ways to die often. If you've been around sheep, I mean, you just know that Richard and Bobby, shepherdess. It's hard to keep sheep alive, right? I mean, and this is what God is saying. If you, apart from the true worship, exclusive worship of God, the people are like sheep without a shepherd. So God is exposing again, watch out for idolatry. You're back from Babylon, you're back from Persia, but still watch out for seeking other gods. And so God is saying, I'm going to intervene. I'm going to intervene among my people. And this is what he says in verse 3. My anger is hot against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders, for the Lord of hosts cares for his flock, the house of Judah, and will make them like his majestic steed in battle. From him shall come the cornerstone, from him the tent peg, from him the battle bow, from him every ruler, all of them together. They shall be like mighty men in battle, trampling the foe in the mud of the streets. They shall fight because the Lord is with them, and they shall put to shame the riders on horses. All right, so what's God describing here? He says, my people in idolatry are like sheep without a shepherd. And so he says, I'm going to execute my judgment on the shepherds. Now, elsewhere in the prophets, God uses this imagery to describe particularly the rulers within Israel. So the spiritual and political rulers who were supposed to point the people to God and to worship Him. He describes them as shepherds. But here I think, and we'll see further evidence of this a little bit later, that it seems that God is using this imagery to describe the foreign rulers who are ruling over the people of Israel, even though they're back in the land. They are the shepherds that are pointing the people towards idolatry, towards not worshiping God. And so God says, I'm going to punish these leaders who rule over my people, and I'm going to care for my sheep, and I'm going to bring victory. It's through them, through the house of Judah, that I'm going to raise up, that I will bring victory over my people. So again, anywhere you see house of Judah, think David. It's through the house of Judah that I'm going to bring victory. They're going to be like mighty men in battle, trampling over the foe, because God is going to be with His people. So He's pointing to there's going to be restoration, there's going to be victory through this house of Judah, so that the people will no longer be like sheep without a shepherd. Verse 6, I will strengthen, again, the house of Judah. I will save the house of Joseph. So here, maybe pointing to the unified kingdom once again. So if Judah's representing the south, Joseph the north, Judah and Israel. I will strengthen the house of Judah. I will save the house of Joseph. I will bring them back. This is exile type language. If you're the people hearing this, you're like, well, we're already back, right? We're back in the land. We've got the temple. What do we need to be brought back from? Well, the exile of the heart, even still. I will bring them back. I will have compassion on them, and they shall be as though I had not rejected them. For I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. So God is saying, even as the people are restored to the land, there still is a greater return from exile that is yet to be brought about, and I'm going to bring it. Verse 7, then Ephraim shall become like a mighty warrior, and their hearts shall be glad as with wine. Their children shall see it and be glad. Their hearts shall rejoice in the Lord. I will whistle for them and gather them in, for I have redeemed them. And they shall be as many as they were before. Though I scattered them among the nations, yet in far countries they shall remember me. And with their children they shall live and return. I will bring them home from the land of Egypt. I will gather them from Assyria. I will bring them to the land of Gilead and to Lebanon, till there is no room for them. He shall pass through the sea of troubles, and strike down the waves of the sea, and all the depths of the Nile shall be dried up. The pride of Assyria shall be laid low, and the scepter of Egypt shall depart. I will make them strong in the Lord, and they shall walk in His name. Again, do you hear all of the Exodus type language here? Right? God saying, I'm going to bring them out. I'm going to bring them back from all the nations to which the people have scattered, and the remnant from among the nations. I'm going to bring them into the land until there's no room for them. We saw this earlier in Zechariah. It's describing Jerusalem as a city that's going to be inhabited as a city without walls, that the people are so numerous that all of the nations, all of God's people are going to come and live and return to come back from the exile of sin and rebellion and rejection against God and come back into the land. And God's saying, I'm going to bring this about. I'm going to restore my people. I'm going to bring them back to the land so that they will no longer be as sheep that wander about without a shepherd. That He is going to restore them so that they would walk in His name, right? Be part of His flock and be restored to Him. Let's look just briefly here in 11 and then try to summarize a little bit. 11. Open your doors, O Lebanon, that the fire may devour your cedars. Wail, O cypress, for the cedar has fallen, for the glorious trees are ruined. Wail, oaks of Bashan, for the thick forest has been felled. The sound of the wail of the shepherds, for their glory is ruined. The sound of the roar of the lions, for the thicket of Jordan is ruined. And so God is announcing here, again, His judgment on the nations, specifically those evil rulers, the foreign rulers who were ruling over the people. Over the people in Jerusalem, God's saying those shepherds are going to be destroyed, that I'm going to free my people from their rule. And then what we see throughout the rest of 11, which we won't read all the way through there, but I encourage you to do it, is Zechariah goes back into his into a sign act. So remember, we said back in at the end of chapter 6, there was this sign that was given where the people made a crown and they set it on Joshua's head. Right, this is something that they did, and it pointed to this future kingly, priestly reality. So now in chapter 11, Zechariah does another sign act. He acts out himself being a shepherd. He takes these staffs, 2 staffs like a shepherd would use, and he places himself in God's position as being the shepherd over his people that was continuously rejected, right? Continuously pushed away as unwanted, and to not rule over them. Let's point to, read with me beginning of verse 7 down in chapter 11, and we'll see a little bit of this. So God tells Zechariah, become a shepherd over my people, this flock that is to be slaughtered, act this out. And this is what Zechariah says. So I became the shepherd of the flock, doomed to be slaughtered by the sheep traders, and I took 2 staffs, one named Favor, and the other I named Union, and I tended the sheep. In 1 month I destroyed the 3 shepherds, but I became impatient with them, and they also detested me. So I said, I will not be your shepherd. What is to die, let it die. What is to be destroyed, let it be destroyed. And let those who are left devour the flesh of one another. And then what Zechariah does is he takes his 2 staffs, one named Favor, one named Union, and he breaks them. And what he's doing is he's reenacting what's already happened to the people, saying that they have broken the covenant, that they have broken their relationship with God in the past through their rebellion and their rejection of Him. So he's kind of reenacting the exile that has already come. The warning being that, if you all reject God again, what is going to happen now that you are back in the land. All of this coming with the promise, though, as we've seen in 9 and 10 and 11, that God is saying He is going to be the true shepherd of His people, that He's going to care for His flock, and that includes us, right? The true people of God from every generation, from every nation, every place on the earth where the gospel is proclaimed, where people come to know and trust in Jesus, become part of the true flock of God. And so I want to read, we've been in it recently in our sermons, but let's go back to Jesus' words in John chapter 10. And after all of this imagery that we've seen in 9, 10, and 11, what is Jesus doing here in John 10 when He talks about Himself as a shepherd, the shepherd of God's people? John 10, let's begin in verse 7. So Jesus again said to them, Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door, and if anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and they and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. So when Jesus steps onto the scene and says, I am this good shepherd, He's speaking into a context, right? A covenantal context. In and of itself, a shepherd is a beautiful image, right? Shepherds have to do everything for their sheep. They have to care for them, protect them, feed them. In and of itself, that's beautiful, right? But spoken into this context, even more deeply, what is Jesus saying? He's saying, I'm the good shepherd who my people have been waiting for. I am I am the shepherd of God. God had said that he would shepherd his people, that he would care for his flock. And so when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, he is claiming all of that for himself, right? That he's going to care for his people, protect them from the thieves and the robbers, as he describes, and bring them safely into the fullness of the covenant. And so for us, when we read Zechariah, hear what he's describing, our response has to be, okay, God had promised a Davidic shepherd king who was to come, and this is exactly what Jesus himself claims to be. And so how are we looking to him as our true shepherd? And so the call of Zechariah, the call for us, is to look not to other shepherds, look not to other rulers. They were to not look to these foreign rulers and governors and kings, but to look to God himself. And so also for us, who are we looking to as our true shepherd? And that's what Jesus claims to be. We're out of time. Any thoughts, questions, just from that quick survey through 9 through 11? Yeah, Kevin?
The first part of that chapter 9 was about Jesus coming on a donkey. He's using metaphorical language. He's coming as a humble servant. It's actual literal fact that he rode in on a donkey. The second part, talking about him coming as a conquering king to release the prisoners.
Yeah.
And it talks about it's basically Exodus language, and Jesus coming, as the greater Moses,
Yeah.
to free the prisoners.
Sure.
He actually talks about, do you take that as literal, that they're going to be in Egypt and Jesus coming back to literally lead a second Exodus in the end times?
Well, I think he's going to do it literally, but I think the way that he does it, right, how all this is pointing to, the gospel writers describe, the way that he brings this about ultimately is through the cross, right? That he comes not with an army to free his people the first time, right? But he comes, and the way that his people are freed from their bondage of sin is not through an army, not through a physical exodus through the waters again, but through the freeing and forgiving power of the gospel as achieved through his death and his resurrection. But then but we also believe, like I said, still yet to come, there is this second return of Jesus where he does come as a warrior and as a king, and we didn't look to it specifically, but that's exactly the way John describes Jesus in Revelation. Is it 21? But him coming on a war horse, as he describes, where there will be. That's the final judgment, the final accomplishment of that.
Talks about the drying up of the Nile. And right now, I think it's Ethiopia, that's where the headwaters of the Nile come. They're building a huge dam.
Yeah.
That can possibly dry up that Nile. So I just think it's an indication that we're
Sure.
in times.
Yeah, and I think a lot of places here where I don't think this diminishes the text at all, where we see, okay, this is how God brought the people out of Egypt in the first Exodus, where he literally led them across on dry ground. He defeated Egypt, all of the plagues and everything that he did, as that being a picture for what he's going to do in the future, which I think they're evoking that imagery in my reading, not to say that this is going to physically happen again, but it's pointing to the greater Exodus, the greater bringing out, on dry ground, which points to the realities of the new kingdom, and so. But there's disagreements about how to read what to look for in our experience, but pointing to a greater fulfillment through the cross. Yeah. So, okay. Thank you all. 12 through 14 next week. Sorry for holding you too long. See you then. Thank you.